Thank you for having me back here.
It's my pleasure.
It's my joy. And the important topic today is we're kind of following on from authentic learning to really think about how we observe children, how we understand them, in that process of documenting their learning, and how we can get caught up in lots of traps, I guess, that make it a chore.
Yeah, that happens.
That happens, yeah.
Or it can happen.
Yeah, and where our priorities are and the purpose of it. So we're going to explore all these things and look at some of the tools that you've got here at Bribie Island Community Kindergarten. So I guess a nice place to start might be just exploring what the signs are when documentation is a chore, when we've lost our way and we're just churning out documentation for the sake of it. And it's probably a very long time since you've felt like that, hopefully, is it?
I don't remember the last time that I felt overwhelmed with documentation, and it's quite a number of years. I think that the thing that is important to us, that if we worry about ticking too many boxes and doing so much documentation, we're actually denying the children, one, our ability to observe them fully, to see where their learning and development is and what their needs may be. We're just denying them that right to just do their thing, be themselves, and for us not to get up in the morning and decide what the children are going to learn for the day. So, for us it's important to just let the children arrive, let them move into their play, and then we step back and observe.
Yeah, and that's the number one thing, isn't it? Is first of all to take the time to stand back and observe, rather than setting up everything. I mean, hopefully the environment is rich enough to support children's engagement anyway, and so if we stand back to listen, to understand what's capturing the child, that's the very beginning of it, isn't it?
It is the beginning of it, and also by standing back and not having these preconceived ideas of what children might want to do in a day, if we're affording them agency, then we don't need to set too much up, and they are able to access what they need to support their play themselves. Maybe with some support from the educators, but mostly they're deciding what the environment looks like.
And the opposite of that is where we're snowed under in this horrible word, which I call a quota, where we feel like we've got to have however many learning stories per child, however many pieces of evidence. And we're literally so bogged under in our screens and capturing and writing that we're missing seeing the child's thinking, seeing their ideas. And I think that lovely quote from Loris Malaguzzi, he says, stand aside for a while and leave room for learning. Ourselves as an educator, learning about what the child is captured by. And then he says, observe carefully what children do, and then, if you understand well, perhaps teaching will be different than before. I love that quote because I think that's at the heart of our conversation today.
Yes, and I think something else that I've just reread again recently is something that Teacher Tom said, and that is that we also can observe children, but we can't possibly know what they're learning unless the children have been given the time to tell us what they know and what they're learning as well. So, what is the point of ticking a box and filling these quotas if we're doing it just to capture an image, put it into a document, and then assume what the children might be learning without their voice in there?
And for me, the ultimate undoing of the purpose of the early years learning framework is where we'll set up an activity and then we'll assume, because the child's had that engagement in that experience, that they've now had an experience for that learning outcome and it's ticked off, that the child now has a strong sense of identity based on that, where when we understand, as I've showed you with this, this thinking about the ripening of an apple and the juicy bits. And so one of the things I observed, and we actually documented today, were children sitting down and taking unrushed time without stress and almost enjoying the process of sorting out their sock, of aligning and getting their footwear organised and on their feet. And we saw the sense of persistence happening with the children, which is just a juicy little part, one little discrete skill, if you like, towards the sub-outcome, towards the learning outcome. So that's a journey, isn't it? That one little tabletop activity that someone might have set up can't possibly tick off that box of, but we can say when we observe a child putting on their gumboots and sorting that out for themselves, that they're gaining autonomy, that they're using persistence, they've got a sense of accomplishment. So, you know, they're the things to notice.
And it's that simple.
It's that simple.
It's that simple.
And that can actually be portrayed in a photo, in a short video, and especially if we saw them when they arrived, struggling and perhaps crying and saying they can't. We've seen that progression, haven't we, in skill that delights us and brings us joy. And I think that's what documentation should be for an educator, is to rejoice in children's learning progress.
Absolutely.
Rather than that chore of snowed under bog.
Yeah, and activities, you know, setting up activities. How do we know what the child really would like to do on that particular day? You know, it's and you know, it's not that we don't do provocations, but from time to time we do. But our provocation may be a big vase of native flowers, and then we might put a selection of pens and papers and things out, and just leave it there.
Yeah, that's
Just leave it there.
open-ended.
Yeah, just having it open-ended, and not specifically wanting or expecting an outcome from that, but then we would observe how the children use that. What would we see while they're doing that? We'd actually see, wow, you know, this child is able to cut well, or use the scissors well, or you know, is you know, progressing with regards to their fine motor.
Or communicating their ideas.
Exactly,
or,
yes.
Yeah,
So much from that you can learn about a child. Sitting all children down to do that, we would no way, we wouldn't do that. It's just a provocation for whoever that interests.
Yeah.
And little things like that throughout the year, if you are observant, you can pick up as you go along where the child is in their development from the beginning to the end of the year when they leave you.
And compare that to when we're under pressure to tick off children's learning. We're almost setting things up for them almost as a test, and then we're questioning them, and we're in effect interrupting their flow of play or their ideas or their thinking or play space by invading that. And that really leads us on to thinking about how we observe, how we document, so that we don't invade their play space or their thinking or their ideas or distract them, which can easily happen even if we sort of click, or at the worst scenario it's like, oh, show me your picture and look at the camera and smile. That's kind of the extreme worst scenario, but just even coming in can be enough of a distraction. So.
Absolutely, and that's where we've become very good at capturing images from afar, using our Zoom very well, so that we don't interrupt. And then at the end of our play day, we share photos with the children of what we've captured, and we get their voices, and they can tell us all about what they were doing then, without interrupting them in the middle of their thought. Because, you know, often if you do interrupt them, what happens? They stop what they're doing, they get up and they move away.
You've broken the flow, that state of flow that's so priceless. And Maria Montessori talks about never, never, never interrupt a child's attention. That's the most valuable gift we can give a child, is that time and space to focus and have attention to a task. So if we break that, it's at our peril. Yeah, and we're basically saying don't bother engaging because I've got something more important to discuss with you. Yeah. So, I mean, you touched on something there. If we're thinking about the purpose of documentation, it's to understand the child, to understand where they're at, so we can move on and support that process towards those long-term learning outcome goals. So that's one. But the other one that you just raised was to share with the child, to understand their learning better with the child.
Absolutely. It's important for us to capture their voice. An example was, today when the children were looking at the images of our bush play, there was an image of one child interacting with you with the nature hunt, and Sasha didn't know what that image was about.
Right.
And so she asked that little person, and he was able to explain to her, and her thinking was completely different. She couldn't see the image properly to what the child was actually sharing with you, but he was able to explain to her what was in that brochure and what he was talking to you about.
The nature hunt.
So what did that tell us?
Yeah.
How great his recall was, how he was invested in the conversation that he had with you. He was remembering what was going on, and he was remembering detail of what he was telling you about in that conversation.
That's precious, yeah. And meanwhile, someone else has learnt something to go and explore perhaps another time that, where is that? And it will lead. So I think that's a beautiful thing about having photos showing again and again. It reminds children of possibilities and of things that interest them and captured them.
So that is our ethos when it comes to documentation. Most of it is with and for the children. It is to inform families. It is to be able to explain to authorised officers where the learning and the development and the continuum of learning is happening, and that's the key. If you have a team who are able to talk about the learning and development and are confident enough to convey that to parents and other people who visit the service,
that's what it's about.
It should be enough.
Yeah.
And we have become very, very minimalistic in our documentation because we don't believe that we have the right to take children's play away from them to document stuff. So if we can't do it by observing or having willing conversations with the children, then we step back and find other ways to do it.
So something that really struck me today, seeing the children in the bush, Kindy, more at the start of the year, is the difference in confidence to explore and skill, like on the high ropes. Is that what you call them, the high ropes?
The slack lines.
Slack lines, compared to the children that we saw closer at the end of the year, and that's such a joy to watch that progression of confidence and ability to pretend or create or invent or do things. And I think that that's what a book like this really shows, that journey over time.
Absolutely.
And that to me is better than screeds of paper documenting someone said this, someone said that, and just be ongoing running records and so much time and energy. It's the simple, effective ways of showing children's learning progress and how you've supported that.